Good evening. How are y'all doing? Hey, I can see you now. It's not a blank room that I can't stare into. My name is Jacob Ball. I am currently serving as the Associate Pastor of Children and Young Families here at First Baptist Church of Stark, and it is a privilege and an honor to stand before you this evening. A little bit about me. I am a recent graduate of Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. Excuse me. You can't play that song set before I come up to speak because I want to belt every song. It's not fair. I'm a recent graduate. I graduated with my bachelor's in philosophy, and I have a minor in Christian studies. Basically what that means is I've studied old people that no one wants to learn anything about, and I'm answering questions that no one asked. So that's essentially what a philosopher does. So the meaning of life, all those good questions that you really don't want to spend time talking about and thinking about, that's what we do. So tonight we're actually going to be talking about atheism and naturalism. And the reason we're marrying those two together is because they do fit. And they fit very nicely together. And so some groundwork before we get started. I want to talk to you, I want to look at what you guys have been studying thus far. And want to point out that atheists are one of two things. They're either crazy or they're deeply committed. And I'm honestly going to argue tonight to you that they're not crazy. Shocking. A Christian is not going to call an atheist crazy. Will not do it. In fact, I'm going to tell you that they're probably more deeply committed to their belief system than many of you are. And it works itself out through the way they carry through their beliefs. We'll get to that in just a second. 1 Peter 3:15, it says, "But in your hearts honor Christ, the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that's in you. Yet do it with gentleness and with respect." Tonight I hope to do that. I hope to give an answer to atheism. A biblical answer, an honest answer that calls into question their belief system and then points them back to Christ. That's what our goal is tonight. The goal is not to win the argument. Because oftentimes, if our goal is to win the argument, we lose the person. And I could care less how many arguments I lose, as long as that person is pointed back to Christ and they give their life to Christ. That's all that matters. I can lose 100,000 arguments with this person. As long as they give their life to Christ, I'll be the loser for that one. Christianity, let's go through our core beliefs for Christianity. God is the one true, immutable, eternal creator. We find that in Genesis 1:1, as well as Colossians 1:16. And he exists in three persons known as the Trinity. We call them Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. 3 in 1. Lots of big seminary words we could throw in here, but essentially those are just big words that we try to explain something that no one really can explain. Even theologians can't explain it right now. Jesus is one person of the Trinity. He's the Son. He's 100% man and 100% God and lived a perfect life, was crucified on the cross for the sin of mankind, and he resurrected on the third day. That is what we believe. That's what we Christians profess. Mankind was created by God in the image of God, and all of mankind is born into sin and deserving of the eternal separation and punishment from God without any hope to earn back our own salvation. We can't do it on our own, which is why Christ came to save us. That's why Christ came in our place. The Bible, this beautiful book, is the inspired, infallible Word of God. It is a collection of 66 books and shows us God's true nature and is our supreme authority. There are other faiths that you guys have talked about already that have other authority sources. Christianity, I'll even go as far as to say Protestant Christianity, which is what we are. This is the only authority. We have a big word we like to use. It's Latin for sola scriptura. All that literally means is that Scripture alone is our authority for faith. Finally, salvation is not attainable by any work of man, but by grace through faith. For salvation, one must believe and confess that Jesus is Lord and that God raised him from the dead. That's Romans 10:9 and 10. Tonight, if you've got your little wonderful sheet in front, if you'll flip it over, we'll actually get started. And before we actually get started with this, I'm going to say a prayer, and then we're actually going to dive head first in. So, Father God, thank you for this night. Thank you for this opportunity to stand before your people, to stand before this youth group, to be able to talk through some very tough questions, some very tough things that we have to deal with in the society that we live in. Father, I pray that you give me the wisdom to use the right words to explain what atheists believe and how we as Christians can engage them and win them to Christ. Lord, we know that your Holy Spirit is the only one that can move their hearts. But Lord, help us to be a positive influence on them. Lord, bless our time together tonight. We love you and we thank you. It's in your Son's precious name we pray. Amen. All right. At the outset, I need to get some definitions off the table. First one is a worldview, the top piece on your top definition on your paper. It says the lens that you blank reality. Does anybody have an idea what that would be? Not everybody at once. Your worldview is the way you look at the world. It's the way you view the world. In other words, it's the lens that helps you understand the world. I'll give you an example. I was born in a Christian home. I look at this world through a Christian lens. I come to the table with a Christian lens, meaning I see the world's problem as sin. I see people who are fallen into sin and say that their only way out of it is Jesus Christ. Someone who comes from a home that's not predominantly Christian, that was not brought up in a Christian home, is going to have a different worldview. They're going to have a different view of what that looks like. They're going to see it as maybe it's a chemical imbalance in their brain. Maybe it's the way they were brought up. They just can't help acting that way. And the way you fix it is through psychiatry or psychology. But their worldview shapes that. So basically, when I say the word worldview, I'm literally talking about the way you view the world and how you understand reality. So it's the lens by which you understand reality. Anything that you see tonight that has the letters ISM at the end of it, ism. That means it's a belief system. So we talked about a couple of those in this, and you've already talked about those a little bit. Theism. It's a belief system that there is a God. Monotheism. The belief system that there's only one God. Polytheism. The belief system that there's multiple gods. Pantheism. It's the belief system that God is in everything, or God is everything. Everything is God. Panentheism. God is in everything. You notice the ism on the back of everything? All that ism means is it's a belief system built out of that initial one. We're going to talk about atheism, or atheism, if you want to pronounce it the way the Greeks would have pronounced it. This word comes from a prefix and a root. The prefix is a. And anytime you see that in the Greek language, it means negative whatever I'm saying next. So apistos means belief, so no belief. So in this scenario, we have atheos, or atheism. Theos is the Greek word for God. So it's atheos. So what do you think that means? No God. So it's the belief system built upon the idea that God doesn't exist. Am I being redundant enough right yet? I went to school to be this redundant. Come on now. I need to lay this groundwork really quickly because if I don't, we're going to miss the point. And I cannot have us do that. So atheism is the belief that there is no God. What is naturalism? How many of you thought you were going to school tonight? How many of you are sick and tired of school and ready to go home for the summer? Praise the Lamb. I got two teachers in the back high-fiving right now. I mean, they show you that they love you to your face, but we really know what's going on. I'm going to move back here because that light is like, wow. Anyways, naturalism. Naturalism, let me give you a base definition of it. Naturalism is the belief that nature is all that exists. Tied into that is that the physical is all that exists. So, the water in here is a physical thing. It's physical. That's all that it is. There's nothing extra going on here. All it is water. I believe that there's nothing extra going on here. There's not some superpower going on in this water. I'm not gaining any superpowers, and I'm also not losing any weight. So there's that as well. But the natural and the physical realm exist, and everything that takes place in the physical realm has a natural explanation. So, for those of you who how many of you are in like 9th grade or just finished 9th grade? Freshmen, what? All right, Did y'all take earth science this year? Is that what y'all was? So, why do we have volcanoes? She was absent that day. So, backstory, a little bit of backstory on me. I was actually a geology student at University of South Florida. I went on many paths trying to run from God, and God ended up saying, nope, you go do this. So here I am doing this. But in one of those paths, I was a geology student, and science explains, naturalism explains, that we have volcanoes because of plate tectonics, and the plates are shifting over the top, and fire comes out the top of it, and everyone's happy. Okay, that's a natural explanation. Someone from ancient Rome, do you know what their explanation would have been? Vulcan. Why do you think we call them volcanoes? Latin for volcano. Vulcan was a Roman god, and he was an angry god. And when he got angry, fire billowed out of Mount Vesuvius, which is on the western coast of the country of Italy right now, which, if you know where Rome is actually in Italy. So they would have seen this on a regular basis. Their worldview told them that there was a God that was angry, which is why there was a volcano. You following me here? Naturalism is the belief that everything has a natural explanation, but depending on your worldview, you're going to look at that differently. So naturalism has its own definition and its own explanations. If I marry atheism with naturalism, what do I get? Something messed up. No, you actually get the universe exists without the need for any supernatural explanation or God. Simply put, you have the belief that there's no God and everything has a natural explanation. So when you put them together, we don't need God or anything supernatural. That's important when you go to the conversation table with an atheist and when you go to the conversation table with a naturalist. Because this wonderful book, you have to sit down. Because it's not inspired by God. Because that God doesn't exist. You got to sit it down. You also have to sit down the entire religious experience that every one of us just went through with worship. You can't bring that to the table because they don't care. Naturally, they can explain that you had chemicals that fired in your brain, norepinephrine and epinephrine, that made you have this euphoric experience. You loved it, you cried. You put your hands in the air because you had motor neurons firing in your arms that lifted your hands in the air. There's a natural explanation for why you did what you did. It was not because you were worshiping a God, because that God doesn't exist. On top of that, too, your Christ that you proclaim was just a man. He wasn't a God. He did not do any miracles. You see the problem with having a conversation with an atheist? They've removed every bit of our firepower right out the gate. And they can do that based on their belief system. If there's no supernatural, then there's nothing other than what we see in front of us. If there's no supernatural, there's no miracles. So the miracle of God coming to earth didn't happen in their eyes. So for you to use that in conversation, that'd be like me asking you to go do something based on the fact that the flying spaghetti monster came here. You're going to have the same reaction. No, you're not going to do it because it's absurd. So for the atheist, you lay down your Bible, you lay down your religious experiences, you lay down everything your mama taught you and your grandmother and whoever else's grandmother taught you in Sunday school. You can't use any of it. All the people in that book are just people. The fantastic stories are myths, and you have nothing that you can talk to them about. Do you feel the weight of the problem that we face as Christians when we try to go to the table with our handy tool belt of ways to communicate with people, ways that we evangelize? That's a problem. Atheistic naturalism, the universe exists without the need for a God or anything supernatural. So what I want to do next is I want to talk about the goal of this. And the goal for the atheist is to marry the belief that there is no God with the belief that only the natural exists. And what you end up with in that scenario is what is being pumped, incessantly pumped, into our news media, into our school systems, into everything that you see on television. How many of you have ever watched the show Big Bang Theory? How many of you think that show is hilarious? I'm not going to lie. Sheldon is an atheist in the show, and he's probably my favorite character. Close with Leonard. Leonard is pretty good too. But this is a comedy that regularly makes fun of Christianity. And I'm a Christian, and I find it humorous. I've become desensitized to it. I'm not telling you to quit watching Big Bang Theory. I'm telling you, be careful when you do watch Big Bang Theory, because there's a worldview being taught. Be careful when you watch anything. There's a worldview being taught. Be careful what you listen to. There's a worldview being taught. Body like a dirt road. I ain't a rocket surgeon, but I pretty much figured out what that song's about. And the worldview behind that song. Some of y'all in here are laughing. Most of you are laughing because you know the lyrics. Some of you are laughing awkwardly because you know the lyrics, and in this moment right now is the first time it's bothered you. And some of you are laughing because you're trying to figure out where in the world I'm heading with this. That's okay. What I want to do now is I want to take away any idea that I'm going to get up here tonight and bash atheists. And I want to tear down any belief that you have of atheists that they're just blind idiots. Because that's most certainly what they're not. Some of these people are the most brilliant people you will ever come across in your entire life. Stephen Hawking, the man believed that there was no God. He had an answer for everything. Probably, I would go so far as to say he was smarter than Albert Einstein. He was on par with Isaac Newton. Some of these people, you're like, I don't remember that from science class. Isaac Newton gave us the theory of gravity. Albert Einstein gave us the theory of that there's something called space-time, what all these sci-fi shows are about. Albert Einstein and Isaac Newton were probably the greatest minds of their age. Stephen Hawking was easily the greatest mind of our age, devout atheist. But he was a devout atheist because he believed that he could come up with a reason and a rationality behind the world that he sees without the need for God. He was committed to that to death. I currently believe, and I think I'm going to believe this to the day that I die, he is no longer an atheist. And I don't say that jokingly. I say that with remorse. Because the choice he made to be committed to naturalism and committed to atheism has cost him his eternity. This is serious stuff, guys. There are people that are walking our streets right now who have no idea who God is. Or they do have an idea of God, and it's based on what they see in you. And then you ask the question, well, what do they believe about God? Are they believing that God is who he says he is? Or are they believing that he's not really real based on how you live your life? I'm not trying to step on any toes tonight, but I want you to feel the pressure of what's going on here. I want you to feel this. Atheism is not blind belief. Atheism is not blind belief. We don't have a mountain of evidence as Christians that we stand up here and go, this is all of our evidence. And atheists are over here going, nope, I don't believe it. In spite of everything that you've told me, I don't believe it. No one, with the exception of like Richard Dawkins, that's Joey's favorite guy. With the exception of Richard Dawkins, no one is just adamantly saying, I'm going to look at all the evidence that you Christians are giving me, and even though it's really good evidence, I'm still not going to believe it. No one is doing that. They're giving you reasonable and rational answers as to why you should doubt that evidence and still hold their position. Bertrand Russell, I'm throwing out atheist names here. Bertrand Russell, Christopher Hitchens, Stephen Hawking, Bill Nye. I grew up loving to watch Bill Nye the Science Guy. No one in here watched Bill Nye the Science Guy. There we go. I watched it. Yes. All right. Bill Nye the Science Guy was awesome. Here's the problem. Bill Nye's an atheist. Bill Nye has had numerous debates with Ken Ham. You should be familiar with Ken Ham because Ken Ham is the one who did Answers in Genesis. You do that in Sunday school, Bible fellowship here. Ken Ham has had debates with Bill Nye, and Bill Nye is still not saved. Is there not evidence, or does he not believe that the evidence is valuable enough to change his opinion? They're not blindly believing this, guys, that atheism is true. They're believing this based on some core beliefs that they hold on to. Belief number one, let me make sure I get them in the same order you have them in. Belief number one, there is no God. Start your entire conversation, when you go to have a conversation with someone, in the back of your mind, go ahead and have this at the forefront. They don't believe in God. So anytime you appeal to God or to Jesus or to anything like that, throw it out, because you can't start there. They believe that there is no God. So every worldview has 4 questions that it has to answer. I don't know if Joey's gone through these with the other worldviews, but every worldview has to. And Christianity is one of those. We have to give you an answer for origin, for meaning. What's our purpose here? Morality, why be good, and destiny. So origin, how did we get here? Evolution, naturalism. I didn't say it was a good answer. I didn't say the answer didn't have holes in it. I just said that they have an answer. What's our purpose here? What's the meaning of us being here? Why are we here? Well, according to naturalism and evolution, humanity is here to keep the species alive. Survival of our species. That's the whole reason evolution exists. You've heard of Darwin's theory of survival of the fittest? Yeah? All right, who really paid attention in science class, ever? All right. I've got a whole slew of people here who were asleep. That's okay. Some of you are nodding off right now. Survival of the species. That's what we're here for. Why should we be good? What's a good answer for that? Why should we be good? We should be good because being good promotes survival of the species. It's to help the species survive. What am I referring to when I say species, so I can make sure we're all on the same page? The science word of it is called Homo sapien, but we'll just call it people. People. We want to keep people alive. So we're good to people, more people live. When you're bad to people, more people die. And if we want to keep the species flourishing and continuing to grow in numbers, we got to not kill each other and feed each other well and take good care of each other. And that means more people are living longer. The species survives. So what's our ultimate destiny under atheism and naturalism? Anybody got an idea? You die. What happens after you die? Nothing. You were right. Nothing happens. It gets better than nothing. You just cease to exist. It is as if you never existed. Because in the grand scheme of things of eternity, you didn't exist. That little word up there is called annihilationism. You ever heard? It's an ism. Huh? An ism. That's tacked to the word annihilation. Anybody know what annihilation means? What happens when you annihilate something? It's completely wiped out. So imagine taking an egg and standing up, letting somebody pitch you a hard-boiled egg, and you just, that hard-boiled egg. What do you think is going to happen to it? Egg pieces everywhere. It's probably not going to be fun to try to hit because that thing's going to be doing this because it's not shaped right, but it's going to go in like 50 different places. Don't try to do that with a not boiled egg because it's just gross. What happens when you hit, what happens when you hit a mushroom with a 9-iron? What happens to the mushroom? And pieces go everywhere. That is annihilation. What was there ceases to be there ever again. Here's the problem. Those in Christian circles, those who are not holding to the true Bible, Not saying that the Bible is completely true. Those people who are saying that in the Christian realm, which I'm leery of calling them Christians, there are some who are pulling this idea into the Christian faith. And the reason they're pulling it in is because they don't want to believe in a God that would allow somebody to be tormented for eternity. Here's the argument. This God who is love could not torment someone for eternity for sins committed in 70 years of existence. This seems like a gross overpunishment of sin. I mean, we're talking 70 years, and they're going to be punished for whatever is left after that? I mean, like a really long time, plus a really long time, plus a really long time. That's their argument. So what they think happens is that God says, you know what, I'm going to punish you, and then you're going to be no more. And they literally just cease to exist. And they believe that because they don't want to accept the fact that someone has to pay for the sins that they've committed. Stephen Hawking is currently paying and will be paying for eternity for the sins that he committed, for his rebellion. The people that you know who have gone on from this life are going to two places, heaven or hell. There's not a third option. There's not an in-between area for those who are kind of good. You're either in heaven or you're not. Those who are not were enemies of God in this life. Those who are in heaven are with God because they were faithful to God in this life. Chasing rabbits at this point. Let's keep going. Annihilationism. When you marry this whole idea with naturalism, it is a grim outlook. It's not a happy picture. But has naturalism answered all the questions? Atheism answered all the questions. They've given us an origin, which is naturalism. They've given us a meaning, which is survival of the species. They've taken that meaning and added it also to our morality to help us survive. And they've given us a destiny that we're no longer going to exist. What flows out of that? You ever heard the acronym YOLO? You only live once? All right, you've heard that now. That's not new, FYI. In fact, it's in the Bible. Paul fought this. There was a group of people Paul fought against. Paul fought against. That's a hard thing to say. Paul fought against back in Greece. These people were the Epicureans. It's in Acts. You can read about them. You can actually read the guy who came up with the theory. His name is Epicurus, and you can find his books probably at the Bradford County Library. If you can't find them there, they're free online. But his mentality was, we only live here. This is all that there is. So if this is all that there is, you might as well live it up. Let's eat, drink, for tomorrow we die. That's an Epicurean quote. Paul uses that in his sermon. So, on the surface, where are there holes and inconsistencies? Don't click yet. Where are the holes and inconsistencies? They've got an origin, a meaning, morality, and a destiny. Where's the inconsistency? Where does the worldview fall apart? Anybody with a hand want to point one out? Without using the Bible, there's not one. Oh, snap. There's not a way to get rid of this worldview? There is. The inconsistency is not in the worldview as a whole. The inconsistency is in the worldview's foundation. That's where the inconsistency lies. I want to make it clear. I'm not giving you reason to believe this belief system, but I want you to leave here understanding the atheistic worldview is not entirely idiotic, stupid, unbelievable. There's a word we use in philosophy called plausibility. Plausibility means that it could possibly be this way. As grim of an outlook as naturalists and atheists propose, this actually could be how it is. You and I don't believe that because we have evidence not to believe that. And I'm fixing to point you some evidence why you shouldn't believe that using their logic. But the point is, they're not stupid. They're not just making this stuff up. They've thought through this system, and they want to make sure that this system works. And so they've tried to shore up any holes that are in the system. So in order to have these conversations with them, we've got some things we've got to do. We've got to start with love, grace, and humility. Is that the next thing on your little list? Yes. Start with love, grace, and humility. It might be really good for me to pull this bad boy right here and just talk with it. Love, grace, and humility. We're going to start there. In a second here, I'm going to give you this really long argument that I'm going to have you go through with me. Forewarning, I do not want you to write the argument down. The argument doesn't matter. You do not need to write it down. Point is, I want to show you how people have gone against this worldview and how we can look at it and make sense of it, but also speak into it and talk about how it can't be true. So first, before we do that, we've got to start with love, grace, and humility. I can't come in trying to be top dog. I can't come in at all arrogant. Arrogance and trying to be the top dog is going to get me kicked out right out the gate. They're going to shut down and not listen to me at all. Can't do it. And I have to show them that I love them. And I show them that I love with them by listening, by getting on their level, by having a conversation and listening to what they actually have to say to me. Second thing is, we got to play on their field according to their rules. I'm going to show you an example here in a second of a guy named Alvin Plantinga. It's a really long name. He's a really doofy looking dude. He's like, I think he's like 6'2", 6'3", rail thin guy, got this epic chin strap beard. He refuses to do the mustache goatee with it, just, thick, Amish, good stuff that he's got growing. But he's an old dude, talks with a funny accent, and he's gone after this whole worldview. And he does a thing that we call negative apologetics. You don't have to know that. Negative apologetics is literally you're not trying to give an answer for why you should believe in Christianity. Negative apologetics is going after those who are saying Christianity is wrong. So it's attacking the arguments against Christianity. Does that make sense? You're defending yourself against the attacks, or you're attacking out with offensive. Make sense, y'all? You got that? Okay. So Alvin Plantinga is defending against the atheistic naturalistic worldview. We'll go over that in a second. One thing you can't do is you can't start with the gospel and you can't start with creation. Why can't you start with the gospel? I'm just going to start pointing at people and asking them to give me the answer. Why can't you start with the gospel? Yes. They don't believe it. You can't start with something that they don't believe. Why can't you start with creation? Because in their eyes, creation is a myth told by Christians to explain how the world got here. Why do you think they hold that creation is a myth? This is free. I'm not going to make you pay for it. Why do you think they do that? They do that because every people group on this planet has a creation story. You can go to Native Americans, those who are still holding to their original tribal Native American heritage, and every tribe you talk to is going to have a different creation account. That's true of North America, that's true of South America, Asia, Africa, Australia. So if everybody's got their own, who are we as Christians to say that ours is right? What gives us the right to say that ours is right? I'm not going to answer that question for you. I just want you to think about it. You can't start with the gospel. You can't start with creation. And you've got to use their logic. You got to use their logic. And what you do is you apply pressure to their inconsistencies. So you find out where there's a problem and you put pressure on it. And you keep applying pressure to the inconsistency. Because if you're playing on their field, using their logic, and you're not using the gospel, and you're not using creation, the only thing you're using is what they use every day. You're using their terms. You're sitting down and having a conversation with them speaking their language. And once you do that, they have nowhere to hide. They can't run away from you claiming that there's just a miscommunication. You're now on their court. It's not like they can take their ball and go home to their home court because you're already playing on their home court. So you put pressure, and you apply pressure to the inconsistencies. So what I'm fixing to do, again, I told you this before, do not write this down. I am going to explain to you in as brief of a way as possible one way that atheism and naturalism has been attacked. And before we get started, I'm going to tell you right out the gate that the gist of the argument is that if we hold that naturalism and atheism are true, naturalism and evolution are true, that's what atheism believes, that naturalism and evolution are true, together, that we can't rely and we can't believe that our own mental abilities, our own ability to think and our own ability to reason, are actually reliable because of what naturalism and evolution are actually trying to achieve. So what I said at the onset, that naturalism is out to survive the species, that's a behavioral thing. You're trying to make sure that people do, or the species does, what it needs to do to survive. Y'all didn't know y'all was having a science class tonight, did you? Some of y'all are looking at me like, I just had this at school. I don't want to do school anymore. There's 2 days left. Oh my gosh. No. Made me lose my train of thought. Naturalism and evolution, if they're married together, are after survival. They're not after truth. And that's a big deal because in their belief system, the only thing that matters is the behavior. It doesn't matter what you believe that causes the behavior, so long as you behave in that way. I'll give you a clear example, and then we'll go into planning as argument. Clear example is this. If I believe someone is chasing me with a gun and I leave this room and run out that door immediately, I have run out that door. If no one is in the room chasing me with a gun, that is a false belief that has caused me to run out this door to safety and I have survived. Now, if I run out of this room because someone is chasing me with a gun and I go outside, I'm still at safety and I've still performed the same task, correct? But now the belief is true. What atheism and naturalism and evolution are after is me going out that door. It doesn't matter whether or not someone's here, just that I'm out the door. So whether or not the belief is true or false it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you believe. So why is that a problem? If it doesn't matter the content of the belief, why is that a problem? Because every belief that we form, everything that we do is based on a belief. And if it's based on a belief, whatever we're believing doesn't matter as long as we act the way we should act. Let's look at planning again, then it'll make a little bit more sense. So there's going to be a bunch of symbols and a bunch of fun things up here. Just look at it. Don't write anything down unless you absolutely need something for clarification. So, you hate algebra. How many of you have already had math and cannot stand algebra? So, the letters that you see up there are variables. Y'all remember that term? You can sub in whatever you want to. The P, I'll explain the whole thing to you. The N in the case up here is naturalism. Anytime you see N in this next couple slides, it's going to be naturalism. If you see the letter E, it's going to be evolution. If you see the letter R, what I mean by the letter R is the reliability of our reasoning and our thinking. That literally means that what we think and what we believe is actually reliable stuff. We can rely on it to be true. Follow me there. So that whole sentence down there, that P with the bracket on it, the P with the parentheses, I'll read the sentence to you in the structure. It says, the probability that my mental reasoning abilities and my thinking are reliable if I believe that naturalism and evolution are true. That's what that whole bracket thing means, that there's a probability associated with me being able to reason and that being okay and reliable. I can formulate good beliefs and true beliefs off that as long as I believe naturalism and evolution are true. First slide, one other thing I want to talk about here is a defeater. You need to know what a defeater is. A defeater is any statement that calls into question your beliefs. So, Paul used this in his arguments with multiple people, but in one of his letters specifically, he said, if Christ is not raised, Christians are Christians above all should be sorrowful, should be mourned, should be pitied above everybody else. If Christ is not raised, we should be pitied above everyone else. So Paul's using this idea. That's a defeater for the Christian faith. If they find Jesus' bones one day, and it's actually proven that Jesus Christ did not raise from the dead, then you and I, everything we're doing right now is false. It's worthless. That's a defeater for the Christian faith. You follow me what a defeater is? Any statement that goes against your belief. So that's a defeater. I'm going to use that term here in a second, and I'll explain it in just a second, but just follow me here. So we're going to talk through this whole thing real quick. This is Plantinga's argument. What he argues is that the probability that we can trust our mental ability while still believing that naturalism and evolution are true is very low. He doesn't believe there's a high probability of that. Let me explain that to you. Joe is a 30-year-old man who smoked since he was 12, been drinking since he was 13. He's morbidly obese. He has a family history of heart disease, and most of his family members, his family heritage, dies in their mid-50s. What's the probability that Joe's going to reach 80 years old? High or low? Low. Jim is a 70-year-old man who watches his diet like a hawk, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, runs 10 miles a day, and is currently 70 years old. What's the probability he's going to reach 80 years old? High. You just did conditional probabilities. Plantinga used that same logic. He'd given some conditions. The conditions he gave were naturalism and evolution being true. And he said that if we believe that's true, then our mental ability is not reliable. He says it's very low, there's a very low possibility that it's reliable. What I mean by reliable is that you can base your life on the things that you think of. He says it's really low if you hold naturalism and evolution. Why did he say that? You remember my principle earlier where I told you that all that matters is the behavior? That's where this comes into play. See, naturalism and evolution are not after your beliefs. It doesn't matter what you believe. So long as the species survives and so long as the behavior that you perform keeps the species alive. So whether I believe that there's a God or I don't believe there's a God, as long as I do things that keep me alive, that's naturalism and evolution. The belief content doesn't matter. So Plantinga says if my belief content doesn't matter, then any belief that I form doesn't matter, so long as I behave the right way. So he thinks that the probability is low that we can rely on and trust our thinking. The next statement is that if a person accepts and believes naturalism and evolution, and he sees that there's a probability that his senses are reliable, that probability is really low, he now has a reason to believe that his reliability is low. His rationality and his ability to understand and reason is low. Does that sentence, the way I've explained it, make sense? Yes or no? I legitimately need you to go yes or no. And the reason I need you to do that is because if you skip out on any point through this conversation right now, you're going to miss the whole argument. And if you miss this whole argument, you're not going to see how people, men and women, just like you and me, are trying to come to grips with atheism and trying to poke holes in it so we can say, this is why it's not working, and this is why Jesus is the answer. But we can't get there unless we tear down the fort first. I got to get past the defenses before I can actually build up the foundation of Christ. I got to tear down what's there, and then I got to rebuild what's not there. So we got to get there. If you accept that naturalism and evolution are true, and you also accept that your reasoning abilities are low on being reliable because those are true, then you've got a problem. You've either got to say that naturalism and evolution aren't true, or you've got to believe that the reliability is high. Joey and I had a conversation about this today, and some of the people that attack Dr. Plantinga have attacked that point right there. They've said, how can you say our reliability is low? He takes them back to the first point where he explains how the reliability is low. And he says, if I'm not after truth, and I'm just after surviving, then I can't trust what I'm thinking. If I can't trust what I'm thinking, I've got a real big problem. So if you have a defeater for the reliability, you also have a defeater for every other belief that you hold. Because if I can't trust that my beliefs are reliable, my reasoning ability is reliable, then anything that I used my reasoning abilities to come up with is now also not true, or very low chance of it being true. That includes the idea of naturalism and evolution. because those are man-made theories. If man can't trust his own thinking, then everything that man thinks has got to be suspect. We've got to keep it at arm's distance. We can't hold on to it truthfully. And if I can't hold on truthfully to the things that man's thinking, then everything that man's thought, we have to push away. We can't accept any of it. So if you accept that naturalism and evolution are true, and you acquire a defeater, something that says that it can't possibly be true, you have two options. You accept the defeater and you move on and say that those are not true anymore, or you try to work out a way to get them to work together. And you can't do that. Thus, the conclusion here is that you can't hold naturalism and evolution together, because mankind can't survive that way. You and I experience things on a daily basis that tell us that our senses are reliable. Our mental capacities. How many of you drove today? How many of you drove to get here tonight? How many of you got in a car with someone to get here tonight? Those of you not raising your hands, you're not sweating enough to have walked here. So, you took it upon yourself to judge whether or not it was a good idea to get in the vehicle with someone or to obey the rules of the law to get to this church. You had to use your mental ability to get here. If your mental ability is not reliable, you would never have made it. So common experience around us tells us that something's not right here. We know within our own selves that our minds are reliable. You sat down in a chair tonight. You looked at the chair, you judged, yeah, that could probably hold me. And you sat down. I don't see anyone sitting in the floor after they broke a chair. Why? Because your senses and your mind and your reasoning were reliable to point to you that, yes, this was a good idea. That fact in and of itself points to us that if our senses are reliable, we know they're reliable, then naturalism and evolution can't be true together. You can hold naturalism and it be true. It's got some holes in it, but as long as you just hold naturalism, that only the natural world exists, you can kind of get by. You can hold that evolution is true, and you can kind of get by. I mean, there's even people that are Christians that are trying to marry evolution with Christianity. They call them Christian evolutionists. I don't know what they're thinking, but it didn't work. There's many reasons it doesn't work. We won't go into that. But you can't hold them together, because neither one of them are after truth. And our world desperately needs truth. And it runs on truth. It runs on the things that we do in and every day being true and being right and being rational. So what I'm telling you is naturalism and evolution can't be accepted together. That's Plantinga's argument. There are multiple arguments out there that people have attacked atheism and naturalism and evolution with. C.S. Lewis has one. If you get an opportunity, if you've never read C.S. Lewis, if you like the Chronicles of Narnia, how many of you have ever seen those movies? They're pretty cool movies. I'm an adult and I think they're pretty cool. Some of our other adults in here think they're pretty cool. If you're in high school and you don't think that they're cool, wait about 10 years and your kids will watch them with you and then you'll think they're cool. Maybe 12 to 15 years, not 10 years. That's a little too soon. But they're going to be cool to you one day. Point is, C.S. Lewis wrote some really good books. One of them is called Mere Christianity. And in Mere Christianity, he argues for the faith. He argues against some of those atheists that I mentioned to you earlier. Point blank attacks their beliefs. And he attacks them on their terms. It's possible to have those conversations. You start with the inconsistencies. You start where they are to get them to where they need to be able to hear the gospel. I said it before, you can't start with the gospel. You have to start on their own terms. How many of you ever heard of a guy named Francis Schaeffer? All of my adults in here are like, yeah, I've heard of him. Yeah, got one student in here that's got an idea who Francis Schaeffer is. Francis Schaeffer was in the late 60s, early 70s, into the 80s. He was a guy that lived, I believe, over in Switzerland. Had this really cool chateau that the idea behind it was he brought people who didn't believe in God into his home. And he did one-on-one relationships with them. And the idea behind it was that if he could have a conversation with them, he could get them to see who God is. And the way he did it was on their terms. So to the guy who was the atheist, he would sit down and he would talk through what this person believed. And he would lay out what they believed. And he would have them answer questions on what they believed. And then he would have them look at their answers. And he would point out that they don't match, that they butt heads. It's a term he calls taking the roof off. And what I would warn you guys against tonight is this. If you're going to take the roof off somebody, you better be there to pick them up when it falls apart. I talked about tearing down their walls and their defenses. You got to do that lovingly. You got to start with love, grace, and humility. You've got to apply the pressure that needs to be there to these worldviews. And then when their worldview falls apart, you got to be there to pick them up. Because it does me no good to tear down your walls and to walk away. Because all I've done is be a brute. All I have done is be cruel. I've been cruel to you because what I've done is torn down everything you believe and then left you to pick up the pieces. You got to think about how committed these people are to these worldviews. What would Bill Nye have to sacrifice if he were to believe in Christ? More than any of us in this room will ever understand. What about a fictional character? What about Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory? His character is a devout atheist. He's a naturalist to the core. He's a theoretical physicist. He looks at the way that things work in reality. He thinks about those things. What would it cost him if he believed that there was a supernatural power behind everything? Let's bring it closer to home. What does the gospel demand of you if you were to give yourself to it? There are some of you in this room that are living a faithful life. You're following Christ. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're serving Him. There's some of you in this room who are coming to church every Wednesday night, some Sundays. You're coming here, you're putting on your Christian coat. You're leaving here, you're taking that Christian coat off, and you're going through your life. Let me tell you what that is. That is called practical atheism. You are a practicing atheist when you leave this building. Your life says there is no God. And that's a problem. It's a problem for me because I care about you, and I don't want to see you suffer the same fate that awaits those who don't believe in Christ. But it's an even bigger problem for you. What will you have to sacrifice in order to follow Christ? Most of it will be your reputation. We do not live in a day and age where Christianity is cool anymore. It's not the cool thing to be a Christian. It's actually probably the most uncool thing you could be. Like if we had like niche groups in high school, when I was growing up, the niche group in high school that was the weird people that no one wanted to hang out with was like the trading card game playing band nerds. No one wanted anything to do with them. In today's day and age, that's the Christian. Why don't they want anything to do with you? They don't want anything to do with you because your life should be lining up with the Bible. And when your life's lining up with the Bible, you yourself become a target, but you also become an agent of conviction. Inevitably, there's somebody in this room right now, and I don't even have to ask, I don't even have to point you out, you're here, who's sitting here and going, that's me. I don't have some weird intuition that gives me that idea. I just know that in a room this size of people who profess to be Christians, I also believe the Bible and had people in the Bible who profess to be devout followers of God, who Christ called whitewashed tombs because they were beautiful on the outside and polished up, but there was nothing but death on the inside. They're called Pharisees. Bible term, Pharisees. There's going to be many in that day that say, Lord, Lord, we did all these things in your name. And he's going to say, I never knew you. Not that you didn't know me, but I didn't know you. Practical atheist, that's you. Marginal Christian, that's you. Lukewarm Christian, that's you. Person who comes and puts on your Christian coat and walks out the door and wants to be cool and wants people to think you're awesome and you're like this really awesome dude, whatever that looks like in this day and age. For lack of a better way to put it, God could care less if you're cool. I could care less if you're cool. I don't even care if you're happy. I don't want you to be happy if that means it sacrifices your holiness. You're set apart for a reason. You're set apart so that God can use you to reach those who don't know Him. Part of the people that don't know Him are these atheists. Remember, guys, they're not crazy. They're committed. They're committed to the belief that there is no God. And now they're trying to figure out a way to explain this reality that we're all a part of without the use of God. Let me be clear, it's not a game. When you talk to someone about your faith, you're not engaging in a friendly conversation. I hope it's friendly, but you're not engaging in a friendly conversation. You're engaging in an all-out war for their soul. That doesn't mean you need to come in guns blazing. Although that would be kind of cool, come in guns blazing. You need to come in ears open, eyes open, heart open, to listen to what holds them back from getting to know Christ, and then to speak life into that. Some words of warning, and then we'll dismiss to small groups. Words of warning are, do not be shocked if they become hostile. Did I take up all your time? Yes! Do not take it personally if they become hostile or they rebel. I get this way. I was a youth pastor for 2.5 years in South Georgia, and I used to get in trouble all the time. The adults in the back were like, yeah! The kids in the front were all the time. The previous youth pastor would preach for like 20 minutes on a good day. On a long day, he was 20 minutes, and then they would play for 45 minutes. Some of you were like, oh, that's an awesome service. No. I was a 45-minuter on an early day. Like, we got out early if I preached for 45 minutes. So let me hurry up and finish up. Don't be surprised when they are belligerent to you. Don't be. Because inevitably what's going to happen is you're going to speak into their life. You're going to tell them the truth. You're going to point out the inconsistency in what they believe, and they're going to go, hold up. I never asked for this. Bye. Why are they going to do that? Because you've now brought them face to face with truth. And I don't know if you realize it or not in your own life, but when I'm presented with truth that cuts me to the core, I recoil from it. I don't want to hear it. So don't be surprised if they do that. Don't be surprised if they rebel, if they start talking bad about you, if they start calling you a weirdo or whatever they do these days to make people feel bad. Cyberbully you, whatever they do. Regardless of what they do, realize one very important point. They're not rejecting you. They're rejecting God. And rejecting you, rejecting the messenger, is nothing new. Rejecting the messenger is what happened to Samuel. Remember Samuel, book of Samuel, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, the dude in the Bible that we read about? Yeah. His life, Israel rejected him being the judge, and they wanted a king. And so Samuel's like, God, what do I do? He's like, Samuel, they're not rejecting your judgment. They're not rejecting you as judge. They're rejecting me as their God. So I'm going to give them a king. And we saw how well that worked out for Israel. They're not rejecting you. They're rejecting God. And as long as you keep that in your mind, you're not going to take it personally. You're going to continue to be able to love them. You're going to continue to be able to speak into their life. And when it hits the fan in their life, they've seen how much you've loved them. And they're going to come to you. And they're going to listen to you. And they're going to want to hear what you have to say. Why? Because you've shown them love. You've been humble. And you've shown them grace. You've applied pressure. You haven't stabbed them. You've applied pressure to cause them to think about what they believe and why. And you were there to catch them when they fell. Guys, that's what we're supposed to do. I told you tonight I'm not going to give you a clear-cut answer on how to defeat an atheist. Because there's not one. They come in all shapes and sizes, and committed and uncommitted. The point is that what you can do is you can love them. You can pray for them, and you can be there for them. And those three things are going to speak volumes into their life.